Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. This is the Harpe Brothers, Butchers of Men, by a channel I've done a couple times, Faces of the Forgotten. It's a good channel. Boom. If you could click the thumbs up button for me, that helps out tremendously. Subscribe if you'd like. You can donate to the channel through the thanks button. If you do, you can request a video and your name will be sponsoring for that video. The Harpe Brothers fascinate me. You know how Jack the Ripper can fascinate? It's that, well, for Jack the Ripper, it's the serial killer that got away, you know? The Harpe Brothers, they fascinate me because one of the sites that they went to is Cave in Rock in southern Illinois, my state. It's about 4.5 hour drive, and I do want to go to it. It's in the Shawnee National Forest, but they fascinate me because it was around the Revolutionary War, and they were just insane. I think the scientific term is batshit crazy. I think that's scientifically speaking. So we're going to go ahead and get into this video, and yeah, this is just a me wanting to do it, and I like Faces of the Forgotten. So let's do it.
Many years ago, back in the late 1700s, there were two strangers who appeared in Kentucky. They would cut a swath of death and destruction through several states for a number of years. Death and terror would be in their wake. It is believed that they originally came from the borders of Virginia. Some say they were born in Scotland and emigrated with their parents to North Carolina. Some say they were brothers. Some say they were cousins. But they would go down in history known as the Harpe Brothers. Their names? Micaiah and Wiley Harpe. Micaiah, who was the eldest, was known as Big Harpe. He was born around 1768. And young Wiley, well, he was known as Little Harpe. He was born around 1770. Now, Micaiah was the son of a man named John Harpe, while Wiley, his real name Joshua, was the son of John's brother, William. The two were kind of an odd couple, but they were terrifying. Micaiah Harpe was this imposing man. He was more than 6 feet in height. He had long limbs, a large tomahawk he always kept at his side. And this is how he got his nickname, Big Harpe. And little Wiley, who was smaller, he was no slouch. He was no less dangerous. Little Harpe was described in a warrant issued by the Kentucky governor as, quote unquote, very meager in his face. He has short black hair, but not quite as curly as his brothers. Now, Micaiah and Wiley, they'd left North Carolina in 1775 and went on to Virginia to become slave overseers. With the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, they found themselves fighting with the British. It was not for their dedication to the cause, but rather the opportunity to kill and cause destruction. The men fought alongside the British at the South Carolina borders. Then they joined the Cherokee Nation, who were also fighting with the British. And it was then that they began pillaging and rampaging. And in the process, these Harpe brothers kidnapped a pair of women. Some say one was the daughter of a man who'd shot Wiley, or said that they kidnapped them.
I don't know how true this is, but the reason why they joined the British, I don't know if this is one of the speculations. Their parents used to be farmers. I don't think they had a lot of land. And back in those days, depending on what you grew, cotton went north, and you paid the market price of whatever Massachusetts was willing to pay, something like that. And then, of course, it would go to London, get spun, and then come back. And I don't know the process. And then the other choice was tobacco. And tobacco you shipped to London, and you paid whatever, or you got whatever they deemed the pay was. And so the farmers back then were cash poor, land rich. And then these taxes came around and started, it was a screw job basically on the farmers. And it was a way to take land. And so they would raise taxes on the people. People couldn't pay, so they would sell land. And then eventually they're not making much profit at all. And, it was a shady thing that happened. Shady business. You have crooked politicians and sheriffs and all kinds of stuff. Like it doesn't happen today, right? So the sons, the parents sold the property, and I think they moved. The sons grew up seeing all this happen, seeing how it affected them. And then when the war started, they joined the British because they wanted to kill the people that had hurt their family. So, it set a bad taste in their mouth, which made them lash out. How true that is, I don't know, but it's honestly, it's reasonable to expect people would turn, but I have a hard time seeing someone turn so much, because I don't know if their parents were ever killed or what by it. That's different. But what these two go on to do is completely different. They apparently really enjoyed what they did.
In any event, their names were Susanna Wood, who went by the name of Susan Roberts, and Maria Davidson, a.k.a. Betsy Roberts. Big Harpe took them both on as his wives. And Betsy Roberts would become more of a servant. She was second-hand, and she was also there to be shared with his smaller brother. By 1781, the Revolutionary War was over, but the Harpes kept right on fighting with the Native Americans. This would be an opportunity for them to go on with their wicked ways, and they would relish in raiding the nearby homesteads of settlers in the Appalachian Mountains. The Harpes raided their way through Tennessee before settling in at Beaver's Creek near Knoxville. It was around 1797, and at this point, Little Harpe married the daughter of a local preacher. Her name was Sarah Sally Rice. So there were 5 of them now in the Harpe group, and they all lived.
I don't think that wedding was mutual. I don't think there was love there. I think it was a kidnapping, and that's how, they were forced. I don't think these guys ever really found women that loved them. They just kidnapped them and raped them, and then forced them to have their children, and Stockholm Syndrome, basically.
Together in this cabin there along the Beaver Creek. And there they began to steal from their neighbors. They'd steal anything they could, especially the livestock. They would butcher the livestock and bring it in town, and every week it seemed they'd bring more and more meat in. They always had more pork to sell, every trip. Finally, they stole one of the neighbors' finely bred horses right out from his stable, right in the daytime. And by the time anyone noticed and tried to confront them, they were gone. They had planned one step ahead every time. But everyone knew what had been going on, and they would not forget.
Why does this guy right here look like Captain Hook? Or is it just me?
A posse was formed to capture these Harpes, and they finally caught them. But on their way back to Knoxville, those brothers escaped. Not the women, just the men. Now they would really go on the rampage. They were mad. The Harpe women would later say that this seemed like a turning point where the two men would declare war on all of mankind. The brothers would begin killing travelers that they happened to come across, anybody. They saw a man named Johnson in a rowdy groggery just outside Knoxville, and they dragged him out of the place and they killed him. They disemboweled Johnson. They filled up the opening with rocks so the corpse would sink to Holston River's bottom. Johnson's bloated, rotting corpse was discovered days later drifting downriver. The brothers and their women bolted, and they trekked to Kentucky from there by way of Cumberland Gap on the Wilderness Road. Along the way, they robbed and murdered a peddler named Peyton in December 1798. Then they shot two unlucky men from Maryland named Paca and Bates. Bates died straight away, but Paca, stunned and wobbling, he was able to stagger away, but not before Big Harpe caught up with him, pulled out his infamous tomahawk, and he split the poor man's head open, wide open. Well, with the job done, they pilfered the dead men's belongings, and on they went. That was the trait that they would be known for, disemboweling their victims, filling the void with rocks, and dumping them into the river. This would become their signature. This is how they would live, beasts on the prey. They would next come to a place for travelers called Ferris's Inn, and there was a kind man there. His name was Langford, and he said to the Harpe brothers and the poor women, he said, "I'll pay for your food, I'll pay for your lodgings." Well, while he was talking, the Harpe brothers were looking at his purse. It was a fat purse filled with money, abundant coinage, as they said in those days. Wry smiles between the brothers. They came up with a plan. Now, in those days, travelers often journeyed together. It was dangerous to travel alone. So the Harpes persuaded Langford, "Hey, let's all travel together. It's safer." Unfortunately for Langford, cattle herders found his body a couple days later. Well, the Harpes were soon identified as the suspects, and immediately there was a posse formed, and in short order, they captured the Harpe gang near a place called the Crab Orchard. It's the second time. It was Christmas Day. They were taken to Stanford Jail in Lincoln County, Kentucky, and there the brothers sat with their now pregnant wives. Then they were transported to Danville Jail in January 1799. There would be a trial there. But, just like before, the men escaped. It was March 16th, 1799, and they left their women behind again. There would be a trial, and the women were tried and acquitted. It was April 1799. All three women gave birth in jail. Now there was a bounty on their heads. The governor of Kentucky put a $300 price, dead or alive, but that didn't seem to make any difference. They were heading west, and on the way they were killing more people. It was in 1799 when they arrived at the infamous Cave in the Rock on the Illinois side of the Ohio River, and now they were bloodthirsty and completely out of control. It was here in Illinois when the duo met up with the notorious river pirate Samuel Mason, because that's where Mason was, right in that cave. He was also a Revolutionary War veteran, and he used that cave as a hideout for him and his outlaw gang. Now they would wait for boats to come down the river, the Ohio River, and they would ambush and kill the crews.
They would ambush the boats, but they didn't kill everyone they encountered. He had a more of a code where if you fought and you resisted, then they killed you. But if you fought and you resisted, then they killed you. If you surrendered, they might beat you up a little bit, beat you up pretty good, but you lived. But if you just surrendered, they pretty much took what they wanted, patted you on the back and thanked you, and then sent you on your way. Like, kind of like you didn't do anything to us, so we're not going to do anything to you in terms of, hurt you or anything.
They take the boats to a nearby port and sell whatever they could, the boat and its contents. Often, as was with the Harpe Brothers, they would do the same thing, load the bodies of the crew members with rocks and let the bodies sink to the bottom of the river. Let the fish have them. Well, soon after, the Harpes went too far. There was a flatboat with 2 immigrant families and lots of provisions coming down the river. They were all in the cave looking around the corner. They were wringing their hands. Here they come. What's our plan? Well, they didn't have to make a plan because, unfortunately for the families, their flatboat stalled near the cave, probably got caught up on a deadhead or some brush. Well, that was the opportunity they needed. The pirates descended from the cave, they rushed the shoreline and attacked the poor families. Well, they brought them on shore and they were pillaging the boat, and while the pirates were going through the provisions, what did the Harpe Brothers do? Well, they took one of the men just for fun on his horse to the top of the cliff there, the cliff overlooking the water right at the edge. They had him stripped down naked. They put a blindfold on him and they lashed him to his horse. Then they beat the horse on the rump until it jumped off the cliff, killing both the horse and the man. And they started laughing. They thought it was entertaining. And there's the pirates down below. They're looking up, what the heck is going on up there? And they saw the horse hit the water. And when they talked to the Harpes, it was just too much for them. They blatantly told the Harpes, hey, you need to hit the road.
The Harpes knew they hated that guy, that captain, but that captain was loved by his men, and there were too many of them there, so they knew that those 2 weren't about to take on 16, 20 plus people. Absolutely no way. So they left willingly because they would have been killed. They were stupid, but they weren't completely stupid.
So off the Harpes would go again. Now they'd make their way back to Kentucky and travel near Knoxville, killing whoever they found along the way. And they would leave a trail of dead. Shockingly, they even killed a young boy for his corn. They murdered a girl and cut her body into strips. Then they killed a pair of brothers with axe blows to their heads. And if that's not enough, in what is probably the worst deed that they did, they were to kill one of their own infant daughters by bashing her head against the cave wall because she wouldn't stop crying. Some had said that
they thought they were being hunted, and they had made camp, and they thought that, or the law was, the posse was getting close, and they were kind of hunkered down, hiding, and this baby kept crying, and he just walked over, took the baby out of her hand, grabbed it by the legs, and just bashed it up against a tree. He later said that was the one thing he regretted in his life. But yeah, if you can do that, if you're hunting that person and that person's capable of doing that, you're in for a fight.
the Harpes killed several of their own children. These men were monsters of monsters.
I don't know about killed several of their children. I know about the one. Oh, you know what? Okay. Sometimes the women would be pregnant, and they would beat the women, and the fetuses, would die. So you could count that, but that's the only actual child that they of their own that I know that they killed. I could be wrong, but I do know that they beat some of the women, and they would have miscarriages.
The Harps next traveled through Kentucky. Now they disguised themselves as Methodist preachers. They came upon the cabin of a man named Moses Stengall. He wasn't home, but his family was. Now the Stengalls and the Harps, they'd met before, and as was the custom back then, his wife Mary, she invited them in. She made them a hospitable dinner, and she provided the place to sleep. All were being taken care of. There was a fellow traveler there too. His name was Major William Love. And the Stengalls had a 4-month-old baby boy. His name was James. So Big Harp slept in the room with Love, but Major Love started snoring, and that was keeping Big Harp awake. So what do you think he did? Well, he had his big tomahawk laying there next to his bed, so he got out of bed, took the tomahawk, and swung down right on the Major's skull. Split his skull in two. Well, that did the job. He's not snoring anymore. Then, the next morning, they woke up, and the baby started crying. Well, Big Harp wasn't putting up with any of that, so he slit the baby's throat. Mrs. Stengall went crazy. He could only imagine. She started screaming.
Let me tell a little better story about what happened. So, they wake up, she's got her baby, and they come downstairs, and this is like a bed and breakfast kind of thing, they're staying there. She's going to cook them breakfast. So, I got a cough, hold on. Excuse me. So, they sit down to eat, but her baby's being fussy. 4-month-old baby, being fussy. And so one of the brothers, I don't remember which one it was, said, "Hey, I tell you what, I'll watch your baby. I'm really good. You go ahead and cook us food. And then when you're done cooking, I'll hand the baby off." And she was just like, "Oh, okay." So he takes the baby, he goes into another area of the room, and baby's crying, and then all of a sudden baby stops crying. She's cooking up breakfast. I don't know if she gets done with breakfast, and then she's like, "You are amazing. What are you doing?" Now I gotta sneeze. Coughing, sneezing. So she goes, "You are amazing. What are you doing to keep that baby quiet?" And he just stands up, and there's just blood all over. And while he was holding that baby while it was crying, she was cooking, he just cut its throat, and then waited for her to get done, and was just like, "Here's your baby back." And she's just screaming and went, crazy. So, spoiler, they kill her. I think they sat down and had food, ate the food, and she didn't know that they had already killed the traveler, because she didn't check on him. They put all the animals in the cabin, and then lit the cabin on fire to cover their tracks and to kill everything, and then left. But there were a couple people that saw him do this. Well, they saw them leaving, and so they approached them, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, are you guys okay? Place is on fire." And the Harpe Brothers were like, "It sure is, yeah." And they were like, "Do you guys need any help?" And they were like, "We certainly do." And then they killed those two guys, and then they took off. And I think there were 2 other people that spotted them, but those 2 other people were like, "Yep, nope, we're not going to go over there and help. We're going to wait for them to get out of sight, and then we're going to tell what we told, or tell what we saw."
So she was murdered. Basically wiped everybody out. But that wasn't enough. They burned the cabin down, and they headed out. But even that wasn't enough. That same evening, they saw a campsite where 2 guys were, Hudgens and Gilmore. Next morning, they cornered these 2 guys, and they accused them of the murder, the robbery in the Stengall cabin. So they murdered them. They shot Gilmore, who died at the scene. Hudgens broke free, but the Harps caught up with him, killed him. Well, Moses Stegall came riding back, and he could see the smoke from a distance. He came around the corner through the trees, and he saw the carnage. He was devastated, but he was also very mad, and he immediately formed a posse. Well, it would all catch up with them. The posse finally came around a campsite, and there were the Harps. They were preparing to kill yet another man. The Harps looked up and they saw the posse, and they jumped on their horses and rode off. They split, one riding one way and one the other. Little Harp, he went into the swampy woods, but Big Harp made the mistake of riding on the trail that the posse was on, so they just chased him down. They followed Big Harp. During the chase, they shot him. They shot him in the leg and the back. He flew off his horse. He hit the ground. They got off their horses. They surrounded him. From his knees, he tried to fight them off with his tomahawk, but they easily overpowered him. And now they had him. They had one of the brothers. And now that he was caught, old Big Harp started to brag about the murders he'd committed. He probably figured he was doomed anyway. He said he killed about 20 people. He was almost proud of it. He was proud of it. And after all the bragging, Stegall took a big butcher knife out and he showed it to the tied up Big Harp. And you could see Big Harp's eyes just lighting up. He knew what was coming. He said, "Make it quick." But Stegall said, "No, this is going to go slow." And he slowly started cutting on Big Harp's neck. The front, the side, the back. Little by little, very slow, let the blood leach out. Don't cut the jugular yet. He didn't cut his throat, and Big Harp shouted out, "Be done with it, you butcher." But no, he took his time. He finally did kill him. He cut the head completely off. He took the head and he put it in a sack, and they brought it in town. It was later mounted on a pole and displayed. That town, Henderson, Kentucky.
Quick note. Where his head was put, it was put on a pole. I think it was there for 20 years, something like that. A couple decades. Today, that road is called Harp's Head Road. And there is a monument in place on that road where that pike was put. I don't know whatever happened to the skeleton.
Yeah, wily Little Harp got away. He made his way to Natchez, Mississippi, and then he headed back to that little hideout cave in the rock. He was looking for the Mason gang he was going to rekindle. He was using the alias of actually one of the men there the whole time, a man named John Seton. He got there and they were all gone. They had abandoned the cave. So he did the one smart thing he had done in his life, probably the only smart thing, and kept a low profile, let some time pass. It was now 1804, and by that time it had become widely known that the pirate Samuel Mason had a $2,000 bounty on his head. Well, it turned out little Harpe couldn't take it anymore. His greed was getting to him, his evilness. So he got together with one of the other pirate thugs who knew Samuel Mason. His name was James May. And they would end up murdering Mason to collect that rich, sweet bounty. Well, they did it, and now it was time to collect. And maybe not too smart, they just marched right into town, took the head to a circuit court in Mississippi. Well, there's good news. The head was recognized by the authorities. The bad news, so were Stetton and May. Little Harpe, really, and May. And in no time at all, Little Harpe and May were arrested and put on trial, and with no surprise, they would be found guilty. It would be a hanging for the two, and hanging was done. And when the bodies were cut down, off came the heads. They were decapitated. Those grisly relics would be displayed as warnings to other outlaws in the town square. And that, my friends, that was the end of the Harpe Brothers.
I don't know if you saw that. Was killed by the Harpes. Huh. By the way, this guy loves to go and find the graves of certain things, so that's why he's showing the graves. I didn't know if there was something else. Okay. I hope you found that interesting. It's fascinating to me just how crazy they were. I think a lot of it also, my interest is because they came to Cave and Rock in southern Illinois, and I want to go see that. It's about 4.5 hours away from me, something like that. And I think Harp's Head Road is maybe 6 hours. Oh. Something like that. But anyways, we're going to end this here. I got to go to bed. We're going to end this here. So, hope you enjoyed, and until next time, have a good day, have a good night.